Hi there, I'm Murray Skaman. Today I'm going to do a walk around a case combine just to show you a few things that you can change to make things work a little better for you. And I'm going to start with the pickup right in the front corner. Something that we always do is we move this spring into this position. It comes from factory in the top position, and you aren't able to get enough adjustment on the wheels to get the fingers out of the dirt. And with them flipping in the dirt all the time, you'll get stones and material going into the combine that you don't want, causes premature wear. And so we just move this spring down to this position and you can get the fingers up high enough. So we'll move around to the back side to the auger just to show you the retractable fingers. So here we have the auger with the retractable fingers in it. This one is this is how it came from factory. And also, before I talk about the fingers, you want to make sure that you have the right amount of these bars out of there so it feeds the combine properly. Over here they have a decal on there and it gives you all the measurements. We'll just zoom in that so you can see that. And they've got the two different widths of feeder house, but most of the time we're using the wide ones around here. So there's your measurements that you should have. It's pretty self-explanatory. And we'll go back to the retractable fingers now. And you'll see that there is really no finger exposed here, and we need a little bit more down here. But that's how they come from factory. It's very easy to adjust. And I'll move around to the far side and I'll make the adjustment, and then you'll be able to see the difference. Here we have we're on the right hand side of the combine, or the header, sorry, and this is where we make the adjustment. So I'm just going to loosen these off and show you the difference. So it went by itself. I didn't even have to adjust it, but it's all the way clockwise right now. And we'll go back and we'll have a look at the auger and you'll see the difference. So now you'll see that there is more retractable finger down here, and it's going to make it better for feeding into the combine and also for reversing when you plug the feeder house or the pickup. Now we've moved over to the straight cut header, and this is a brand new header, so the guarded knives are all pretty good, but in any use ones you need to be checking the gap on the guards to the sickle to make sure that the gap is properly so that they cut. Or you can't cut as fast as you want to, or it gets ragged, you get some losses, but you want to make sure that that is set properly. Also, this is your reel pitch, and right now it's set on number 2. That's kind of a starting point. I like to go to 3, and to adjust that you just turn this and you move it to, so there's 3, and there's 4. 4, that's for really large grain, but it will actually pick it right off the ground and set it on the canvases. I start in 2, I sometimes go to 3, but it has to be really bad to get to 4. And if you want to just watch the fingers down there, on that bar there, you'll see how much difference the pitch makes. See how they come back? There's back to number 2. Here we're at the drum right now, and something that gets neglected is the chain drive on this drum. If it gets loose, it's liable to rip new holes in the auger and do a lot of damage. It can get very expensive and a lot of downtime. So after every couple days, I like to go and grab these fingers and just make sure they're snug. This one's brand new and it's right solid. It's perfect. That's how it should be. If you have any more than ½ inch play on those, you need to tighten the chain. So make sure you check that once in a while to save yourself a lot of money and downtime. Now we're on the left hand side of the combine. This is your knife drive on this side. This is a dual knife drive. There's one on both sides. These gearboxes should have the oil changed in them after the first 50 hours. If you don't, you may not get any warranty on it, but it's good to get that old oil out of there and get fresh stuff in it after the first 50 hours. Also change the filter after 50 hours. And to make sure that your knife is running at the right speed, on a dual knife drive, this pulley should be turning at 670 RPM. And on a single knife, 640. So make sure they're at the right speed. Some of the older ones that didn't get picked up on, and they won't cut properly, feeding won't be right. So check that out. Now we're around at the feeder house, And here's your feeder chain that's in here. It wants to be, you should be setting this so that the lowest slat between the slats and the feeder house floor is about 1 inch. And then check your adjusters on each side so that you can maintain that. And if you see one side go loose, you maybe have a bearing going, so it's a good idea to keep an eye on that. Also to check your joiners. They're not visible here right now, but on some of the older ones they had wire joiners, and if those wires come out and the chain comes apart, it goes through the combine, does a lot of damage. And kind of the magic speed for this is 570. When it's on the Mac on, it controls that speed, but on your pickup, that's kind of a nice speed to run that. You're not doing any damage to the crop, everything's flowing nice and even. So run that at 570, keep about 1 inch from the bottom of the floor to the slats. And also the face plate. You want to have this so that it's in the right position, and it makes all your headers work better, makes them flow better, keeps the crop flowing nice and even. And on these ones there is no indicator to say where it is so that you know where to place it. So an easy way to check it is to measure down from the bottom of your feeder house, and it should be approximately 30 inches off the bottom to the ground. And when it's 30 inches off, this face plate should be straight up and down. And as you can see, this one's tipped ahead a little bit. So it's going to make that Mac on just not feeding perfectly. The adapter might drag a little bit. It needs to be just brought back a wee tiny bit. And also, while we're on this side, there's a door here. And on the older ones you could open that up, and I used to like running that open, and all the material that goes on the feeder house slides back in. But the part that I liked the best was you were able to see the feeder chain, and you could tell if there was back feeding or if there was a broken slat. You were able to see in there. It was pretty handy. But on this one they've changed the design a little bit, and it doesn't want to open. And now we're going to move over to the thrashing area. Now we're into the concave area where all the thrashing is done. And you can see that this farmer has 2 slotted concaves in the front, and then in the rear there's 2 wide wires. I recommend running for cereals 2 narrows in the front, 2 wides in the back. Because this guy's doing peas, he's put in a couple of slotted concaves. And up above there is your adjustable vanes. On this one you can change them from the cab because this has all the new auto settings in it. And those vanes up there are very important. I recommend putting all combines in the advanced position and leaving them there. I've never seen a time in 30 years where you needed to bring them back from the advanced position. When you have them in the advanced position, you're not over thrashing the straw and carrying the grain out the back. And as soon as you retard them, what it does is it over thrashes the straw and it'll carry grain out the back. I had an engineer come over here last year from Belgium that had been testing combines for 30 years. And he said the longer you can make the straw, the less rotor loss you have. So it's important to keep them advanced. Do your thrashing at the start with a good concave in the front, and you'll get less loss. Also, you have the first 2 concaves here. This is your thrashing area. This is your separation area. You want to get 90% of your grain out of there in the first 2 concaves, if not more. So we're finding that the case narrow wires in the front, they're working, but they need to be a little bit wider to let more grain out, because they keep putting more horsepower to these combines, and you got to let the grain out at the front. And if you can let the grain out at the front, it's on the grain pan, and when it hits the sieves, it's right on the bottom, and you get no loss on the sieve. I have lots of people tell me that they've got sieve loss. And most of the time what that is, it's over thrashing the straw, and when it hits the chopper, it's throwing it back into the spinners, and when it's going through the air, the grain falls out of it, lands on the back of the sieve, and shows up as sieve loss when it's actually rotor loss. So the most important thing in here is to put a wide enough concave in the front to let the grain out, so that it isn't getting mixed with the ground up straw in there. The gap on the wires on the case narrow wire is a 1/4 inch wide. Some guys are going to different makes of concaves to get a little bit wider. I recommend a 0.3 to let more out at the very front. As you can see in here with these slotted concaves, that's going to let lots of peas out of there. They're going to fall out, and there's no bars on those slotted concaves, so it doesn't grind stuff up. And you don't need to thrash the peas hard, you just need to get them out of there, and that's why they're running them. And also in canola, we like to run a slotted in the first position, a narrow wire in the second position. And that slotted one will let all the canola out and get on the grain pan early. Also, it doesn't grind up all the pods and stalks and dump all that down. When you grind everything up to a pulp, you're having to separate all that on the sieves, and it's a lot more work for the combine. You put a slotted one in the front and you put that in that position in the middle of the day and try it, and you'll find that your sample will go cleaner. The combine will be a lot easier to set, and you'll be able to travel faster because you can run a faster rotor speed with a slot in the front. Now we're over on the right hand side of the combine, and I just wanted to talk about the H-frame that the concaves are bolted into, this H-frame that's in here. And there's adjusters for the H-frame. You want to have it so that it's square to the rotor. On the new series combines, they have extra bolts in here. There's 6 bolts in there, and these ones never really come out of adjustment. So the techs, if they're squaring them, they should be good. They'll never move. But on the older ones, the 8010s, the 8120s, 9120s, they only had 2 bolts, and 2 bolts in the adjuster bolt. And when you put a big wad in, it would quite often shift the hangers. There was just so much torque in there, it would move it. And I had a lot of guys phoning me and telling me that they had huge losses on the combine and they weren't thrashing the grain properly. And I went and had a look at it, and all that is that frame has shifted so that your pinch point is moved over at the bottom, and it loads the sieve heavy on one side. And as soon as you do that, your air all goes to the other side on your sieve, and it blows that side out, and the other side it just walks it out because there's no air. So I've seen up to 6 bushel on canola loss just because of those hangers are not in the proper position. And just for an easy reference as to whether they've moved or not, you can see this slot over here. If we can zoom in on the spot, you can see the slot there. So on the 8010s and the 8120s and 9120s, there should be enough slot there that you can only get your fingernail in. And there's 4 bolts, 2 here and 2 up higher, and they should all be the same with just a little bit of slot showing on this side of the bolt. And also at the back, there's the hangers here too. So you got to do all 4. They should all be identical, and with that it'll put your pinch point dead center on the bottom, and your losses will drop, and you won't have any rotor loss. You'll have better thrashing, you'll have less plugging. It's something you need to check. If you put a big wad in, it's not a big deal to just stop and take the cover off, and you can just have a quick look and you'll know right away whether they have shift or not. So make sure those are square. It makes the whole combine perform a lot better. So now I'm going to go to the sieve area, and I mentioned once before that the rotor causes a lot of the sieve loss that you see, and I tell people a lot of times that the sieves are never the problem. The rotor is always causing the problem. That's why you get sieve losses, because of the rotor. What it's doing, it may be dumping more on one side or the other. You have to do a kill stall and see whether that's happening or not. And if you can get that rotor performing good, your sieves will just come to life for you. And the sieves are very easy to adjust and get to the proper position. I've been setting these combines since they first came out, and I've set them all over the world. And I found that most of the time the settings on the sieves are very similar. And for wheat, I have a set of calipers that I go and check just to make sure, and they're not very high tech. I have 3 bolts on a key ring, and this is my 3/8 bolt. That hook on there is important. When you put it in there, you can feel exactly what you have. So if you put a bolt in there or one of those step indicators, you're never just sure what you have, but this bolt with a hook in there, then you know. So my wheat setting is a 3/8 bolt. I want it a little bit loose on the top and snug on the bottom sieve. My canola setting is a 5/16 bolt, a little bit loose on the top and snug on the bottom. And my 1/4" one is for flax and for calibrating. So I see lots of guys are starting to try this this setting that I don't agree with, where you run your bottom sieve almost wide open and use just your top sieve. You know, we've got 2 sieves in there. We might as well use them. One will help the other. I think why people are doing this is because they normally were running it too tight and you weren't letting air through, and you kind of did this and and you found that maybe things got better. But if you set them properly, you don't need to run that bottom sieve that open, and you'll get better control and a better sample in the hopper. And also on the sieves, if you go in and look at the back, there's some black wire fingers. These are the black wire fingers that I was indicating before, and if you look down through there, you can actually see the bottom sieve. So if you can see down and see the bottom sieve, that's exactly where the air comes out. And when you put an extra bit of load on the sieves, you'll see that your return goes up and your sieve loss goes up. That's because the air is all coming out through those black wire fingers. And there's a flap that you can install in there, and you can buy it from Case or New Holland or any CNH dealer. And you put that in and you hang it down from where the wire fingers are hooked to the sieve. And the part number is a little hard to get because there's a whole bunch of different ones, but the part number for the Case combines is 743083. And you put that in there and it holds the air underneath that sieve, and it makes it do a lot better job. And we have the spinners at the back and the shield feeding all the chaff in there. And when guys are doing canola, they're telling me that they're slowing the spinners down and dropping that chute. So here you'll see that there's a chute and the spinners in here too. And the chute slides all the material, your chaff, your mog, into the spinners, and it fires it out. And I've had guys tell me that they slow the spinners down to stop the loss off the sieves. And I think they've been mistaken. There shouldn't be any canola at the back at that point, because if you let the canola out at the very front of the rotor, it's going to be in the sieves and in the tank a long time before it gets back here. And what I think is happening is all the chaff and stuff that's coming over here, hitting the spinners, some of it's flying back and hitting the sensor board, and you're getting a false reading. And you get throwing pans, and you'll find that you're actually not throwing canola. It's stalks and pods that are hitting that pan, and it's giving you a false reading. So I like to keep the spinners going. I want my chaff spread, and I don't want this down because some of it misses the spreaders and it leaves a trail there. And while we're back here, you can see the controls for the sieves. I'm very fussy on calibrating the sieves, because when you've got a farmer with 2 or 3 combines and you're comparing settings, and you get one guy saying that he's at 12 millimeters and he tells the other guy that to set at 12, but his is actually 14 or 15 because it's out of calibration. It gets everything pretty confusing out there, and they wonder what's going on. So there is a trick to calibrating also on these combines. There's one step missing in the combine on the monitor. So you go up to the monitor and you pick the upper sieve or lower sieve, whichever one you're doing, and you come back here and you close the sieve with the button, close it all the way closed, and then you open it to 6 millimeters. Then you go back up to the cab and you hit OK on the monitor, and everybody presumes they're done. But there's one more step. You should bump that sieve open about four times, and then close it 4 times and put it back at 6 millimeters and see if it is actually measuring 6. And if it's not, you might have to do either a tighter cal or a wider cal. Most of the time it requires a tighter cal. I've had some where I've had to put my hand on top of the sieve, and as soon as it starts to move, I stop and go to the cal on the monitor, and I'll come back and it'll be perfect. So that way everybody is the same. And also, when you have the new auto setting features in this combine, if you don't have your sieves caled perfectly, this combine might do some really weird things, like ramping the fan up or closing sieves when they shouldn't be. So you want to have them caled perfect. It'll stop loss, and it'll make setting it way easier.